With good regularity and discipline, now we are at the 16th class of our most important series for UPSC 2020 prelims. जब हम लास्ट लेक्चर में मिले थे तो वी हैड प्लान दैट वी विल बी कंप्लीटिंग 4 or 5 टॉपिक्स yesterday and remaining 3 topics today. But once we started the topics, we came to know that Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan and Sarfazi Act both needed a lot of detail, so we could complete only 2 topics. But today, even when the topics are long or short, total 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All these 5 topics which belong to month of May economy section will be completed, and tomorrow we will start with international relation. There is no surprise, okay? International relation of March month 2020. So these 5 topics will be completed today. Lecture will be a bit longer, so have patience and listen to me. First of all, we will see what is sugar industry problem in India. These 4 introduction I gave you already, right? Sugar industry, draft national fishery policy, and labor law reforms. Now TRIPS flexibility is something related to trade related aspects of intellectual property rights, and India has raised some voice that please give some flexibility to us, because India is not having a very good regime in intellectual property. That is why. And a status paper on government debt. On government debt, a paper has come, the status paper. So we will see all these things. Come to the first topic, sugar industry in India. Why this is in news? Why sugar industry is in news? Because Niti Aayog was asked to propose a report, give a report, that what are the problems facing sugar industry of India, the pricing, farmer issue, and the factory issue, everything. So Niti Aayog came with this report. For that, Niti Aayog had constituted one task force, and the task force was Niti Aayog's task force on sugarcane and also sugar industry. Now that report has come to the government, so now we need to see what are the recommendations of the report and what are the problems facing sugar industry of India. See, first of all, this task force was constituted on the sugar industry to find what? Long-term solutions, not short-term solutions, because sugar industry is having problems since decades, maybe centuries you can say. So long-term solutions, structural reforms we needed to propose. So what are the problems of the sugar industry, sugar sector, and also we need to rationalize their dependence on state assistance. Many of the sugar industry, sugar sectors are surviving on the state's assistance separately, not from the market forces. Subsidized the state assistance is being given, so we need to rationalize that dependence. Okay, we need to make them independent and make them somehow like they can be controlled by market and still earn their profit. So mandate was including the recommendations on crop diversification. First of all, you know that many southern states of India are having the sugar cultivation, but that place is not suited. That place is not suited because sugarcane industry requires a huge amount of water, and the southern states of India, particularly Maharashtra and Karnataka also, the coastal states, fine, soil is very good for the cultivation, that is right, but the water is not present naturally, so they need to irrigate, and for that they go for groundwater extraction, and then there is already famine and everything because of the groundwater issue, drought you can say. So that increases the vulnerability of the climate and affects the environment very negatively. So in those places, we need to look out for some other crops also. No, please don't sow sugarcane only. Please diversify your cropping pattern, because that is having an adverse impact on groundwater, I told you, and that is very necessary thing. And also mandate included aligning sugar industry with global markets. I told you sugar industry should be aligned with global markets, right? Market forces should be controlling the sugar industry profit and loss, no state dependency. So task force is also expected to suggest that how can we mitigate or reduce the adverse impact of sugarcane farming on environment and climate. Notably, groundwater is very badly affected by sugarcane industry in southern states of India, or somehow recently Punjab has also started. Punjab is not having the groundwater, still started with irrigation and dams, and water is coming from groundwater mostly. And you know, the lots of groundwater extraction if happens, you must have studied in your geography classes that will lead to salty and arid soil for a long term. That will be very much damaging. So what are the issues in our sugar industry? First problem is from the government side only. There is excessive government interference or control in sugar industry, and there is a complete disconnect between prices of the sugarcane industry input, that how much farmers are spend in input of the sugarcane industry and the output, there is huge disparity. The sugar you get in the market is very cheap, and sometimes farmers are spending more than that. So how do we pay the farmers? How do we pay the arrears of the farmers and the industries? Government interferes. Okay, fine, you take the subsidy and provide sugar relatively cheaper in the market. But that is not a real market, right? That is excessive government interference. We need to control that. In India, sugar industries woes are rooted in excessive government interference or control, and there is total disconnect between the input price of sugarcane and output price of sugarcane. So that leads to what? Periodic ups and downs in sugar production. Farmers never know what will be the price, because this is not market controlled price. So prices have been rarely been allowed to be determined by the market forces, and the net result is that periodic up and down in the sugar production up and down also, prices up and down also, and exports up and down also. Sometimes we feel that no, we need to take our sugar back in the Indian geography only, so we will not be exporting them. Sometimes we see that no, there is surplus production, so we should be exporting them. So there is huge disparity and so many up and downs. We need to rationalize these things and make these things stable. For example, take example of today's situation. Today's what is happening? There is liquidity crunch in sugar industry. I told you so many things about the liquidity. It is about having cash or not. If you are not having the cash, you are having the fixed assets, you are not having the convertible capital, that is called liquidity crunch. So why sugarcane industry is also facing the liquidity crunch? Because there has been surplus output. Surplus output is okay, but demand should also be there. No, demand is less, prices are depressed. So you had produced a lot, you had spent a lot in input production, but now when the output happens in surplus amount, your prices in the market are depressed, and exports are also unviable, exports are also not happening. So what do? We just not having the cash in the hand, so there is liquidity crunch. In the next season, our input will be less, then the market prices will increase, very unstable. It has predictably led to the accumulation of cane price arrears and consequential unrest among the cane farmers. So cane farmers do the cane farming, they produce the sugar cane, they give it to the industries, but industries are not getting the prices. So how do they pay farmers? They are not paying the farmers. That leads to price arrears. Okay, residual price amount, because industry says that once we get the money, we will give it to farmers. So that is cane price arrears. And that is where sometimes government interferes and provides this cane price arrears to the farmers, which is very much unviable. Or they provide it to the industries, they provide it to farmers. For that, state governments provide grants, interest subvention, that is reduction in interest, export subsidies also, that you are exporting your sugar industry, or sugar only you will export, right? So we will provide you some subsidies, but that is not very much viable and sustainable. Minimum ex factory sale prices is also provided, but still the crisis is persisting. So come to our very wise Niti Aayog task force has come up with some solutions. First of all, it says that please increase the minimum selling price of sugar. The government can consider a one-time increase in minimum selling price for sugar to rupees 33 per kg. Today it is only 31 per kg for the sugar industry. For sugar, the minimum selling price is rupees 31. Niti Aayog is saying that first of all, for removing those arrears, compensating for those arrears, at least do the one-time increase. Make it 33 rupees per kg, so that the mills or the industries are unburdened and they provide the arrears to the farmers, and then we can go for market forces. It also says that please support the farmers. Introduce revenue sharing formula. Again, I told you about the revenue sharing formula, not profit. We will not wait for the profit to be made. We will just start sharing with the revenue. So revenue sharing formula will be introduced with a price stabilization fund. Okay, when the price is decreased, that fund will be used and it will compensate with the low demand. Okay, when the price will be more, it will gain some money and keep it for the next season, so that some stabilization is made. This way the farmers will be protected from receiving below fair prices, and they will get the very good remunerative price. Remunerative price is what? Profit making price. not minimum, profit making price. And in our sugar industry, fair and remunerative price is decided, that is not minimum support price. Sugar industry, we are having fair and remunerative price. Who determines this? I will tell you in the next slide. Imposition of sugar cess also. It says that if you are exporting the sugar, we will take sugar cess, that will be rupees 50 per quintal for 3 years. The money you get from there, your sugar cess, that will be used for price stabilization fund, right, to provide fair and remunerative prices. Because we are just not looking for the exports in the sugar industry, we are trying to have our sugar in our country and provide it at a very, a stable rate, market control force rate. Nudging farmers away from sugar cropping, they very much necessary in southern states. Give some incentives or do something negative so that they don't go only for the sugarcane. The government can consider capping a farmer's land used by sugarcane at 85% of total holding. So suppose you are having 100 acres of land, government will say that on that 100 acre in a season you can sow or you can cultivate sugarcane only on 85 acres, not allowed more than that, because that will lead to groundwater extraction and exploitation. Now comes the very conceptual topic, your static portion of economy. Sugarcane pricing, how it is done in India. The pricing of sugarcane is governed by, there is order and act for this. One is a statutory provisions of the Sugarcane Control Order 1966. This order came in 1966 that determines some provisions of the sugarcane pricing, and it is issued under, why it is a statutory, because this order was issued under Essential Commodities Act 1955. So we had read about Essential Commodities Act. Now we know that sugar is also under essential commodity in this list, and sugar pricing is controlled by Sugar Control Order 1966 because this comes in Essential Commodities Act 1955, created during the Jawaharlal Nehru times. So the second term was fair and remunerative price, profit making price. What is that? See, this fair and remunerative price, this is announced by the central government, but announcement is done after the recommendations of Commission for Agriculture Cost and Prices, CACP. And CACP consults the state governments and associations of sugar industry also. Understand the process. First of all, Commission for Agricultural Cost and Prices will go to a states and ask them, what do you think? How much fair and remunerative price in your state or in India we should pay to farmers? So they will say that pay this much amount. Then this Commission for Agricultural Cost and Prices will also talk with those sugar industries. How much do you think you should be given FRP? They will say something. Then it will conclude, okay, fine, this much amount should be paid. Now this will go to central government, Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs, and then central government will announce that this much amount we need to pay as FRP to the sugar industries. Okay, so this is a process, and if in exam it comes that who gives this final decision, so you will say central government, Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs. Who gives the recommendation? You will say CACP, and the consulting a state government and association of sugar industries. What is FRP? FRP is not the amount to be given to in the industries actually. FRP is minimum price paid by mills to the farmers. Okay. It replaced the erstwhile, because FRP comes to the farmer, not to the sugar industry. It replaced the erstwhile a statutory minimum price. We had a statutory minimum price for sugarcane also. Now for sugarcane we are having FRP, that is fair and remunerative price, not only minimum, something like making the profit to the farmer. This helps farmers how? Under the FRP system, the farmers are not required to wait till the end of the season. In this minimum support price, the final decision on MSP will come only after the sowing and farming and harvesting is over. But in sugarcane industry, FRP system, they do not need to wait till the end of the season, or meanwhile any announcement of the profit by sugar mills that see how much we are making the profit, so how much we will pay you. No, nothing. Government will decide it before the end of the season only. That margin by FRP is on account of profit and risk to farmers also, so that farmers are not risked and there is profit also, and that will not have any relation because it is before the end of the season only. So this will not depend on the profit made by the mills. Okay, whether they are making the profit or loss, no problem. This will depend only on the government's final announcement of the FRP. But then that means that a loss making industry or loss making mill, they are not sometimes able to pay to the farmers FRP, and that is how the arrears are created, and then the government is blamed that you announced this much FRP and now the mill is not having the money, so provide some assistance. So that is how all these things are wrong. They need some reform, and Niti Aayog has come with a very good plan. Next topic, very easy, draft National Fisheries Policy 2020. Fisheries sector is also having many problems. So for that we came with a policy. The policy is in draft stage. So we will have some understanding of the problems facing in fisheries sector. First of all, understand that who proposed this draft. Department of Fisheries released this draft National Fishery Policy 2020. Can you tell me in the comment section which ministry has this Department of Fisheries? And if you know the ministry, can you tell me the other departments of that ministry? That will be very useful for the candidates reading the comment section and for your revision also. So we need to understand what are the problems in fishery sector that we needed this draft policy. First of all, inadequate infrastructure. Still the fishing is happening with the old tools and the old boats and everything, and somehow fishermen's lives and everything is under danger. During the tsunami also they go outside. So those are the problems. There is inadequate infrastructure. Also in the fishing industry also there are diseases. Okay, absence of a spatial diversification. Only one type of fish cultivation will be done, and maybe demand in the market is not that much for that fish. And genetic improvement is also needed. We have poor brood or breed and seed. The fish in the nascent stage is called seed only, and these are a specific constraint also, that this species will be surviving only in this climate. So all these things are our problems. Limited scope of expansion. Why? Due to overcapacities in territorial waters. That means in territorial waters we are already exploiting the fishing at a very large scale. So expansion chances are very less. I think now we need to go for the inland fishing also. So next point, in inland capture fisheries, seasonal nature of fishing operations. Okay, because although all the rivers are not perennial, right? So sometimes the river will have the fishes, sometimes they will not have. In monsoon season all the rivers will be very much with a lot of water and fishery can be done. But when the hot season comes, the fishing industry depends. Depleted stocks in natural waters. So now let us come with the features or characteristic of this policy. First of all, there are various points, so we will deal with one. Integrated Fisheries Development Plan. First comes the Integrated Fisheries Development Plan, not a sporadic one, integrated one. Government will prepare and implement Integrated Fishery Development Plan for islands to enhance the share in economy. Okay, for islands this is being done, Integrated Fisheries Development Plan, because many islands are very small. So we need to integrate their fishery production, and then we can boost their economy or their share in this fishery industry. We can increase that. We need to come up with a legislation also. The center will also enact a comprehensive legislation. That legislation is in bill stage from last year only. National Marine Fisheries Regulation and Management Bill. We need to regulate the fishery industry or marine fisheries industry for holistic resource utilization in exclusive economy zone. Can you tell me in the comment section? Exclusive economy zone is how far from the baseline of your coast area in nautical miles. Fisheries Management Plan, FMPs, what is that? The center will formulate fishery management plan for scientific management. Okay, scientific management, we just like Japan we can do. In Japan they have very good scientific management of fishery industry. Everything is mechanized. We need to also go for that. Fisheries spatial plans also. Spatial means geographical plans. State governments will be preparing those spatial plans on guidelines prepared by the central government for data management, analysis, modeling and decision making. So everything will be made very scientific, so that adequate level, efficient level of fishery can be done. After taking cognizance of coastal regulation zone rules, we need not violate these CRZ rules. Okay, CRZ rules I might be teaching you in environment section. So we need not violate these CRZ rules, but still we need efficient production of fishery sector. Next thing is very interesting, contract farming. Contract farming in fishery industry, how does that happen? See, there are various multinational companies dealing with the farm and fishery sector. Suppose a company is producing fish oil or maybe vitamin A made from fishes. So that company will give contract to some farmers that, see, in your territory, in your endeavors, whatever production comes will go to our industry. Will go to our company. So the contract is signed, Now the assurance comes to the farmer or fisherman that whatever production I am making, I will get some prices from this company. So that can be done. We need database. Government will implement a national fisheries data acquisition plan involving center and states also, and some other stakeholders also, for example fishermen, for example industry. So database will be created for planning and management. National Fisheries Development Council, this one is very important. This body will be established to provide overall guidance for the implementation of the entire policy. National Fisheries Development Council will be made to implement this and give guidelines to this policy. We need private investment. Obviously, when contract farming is happening, private investment in everything will happen, and we need to integrate. So, for that, cluster approach for the development of aquaculture. Somebody is producing the maybe fishing net, okay, and somebody is producing fishing seeds. Somebody is producing fishing boats. All these things can be done in cluster approach. The objectives include, we need to optimally harness, that is how much we can efficiently do, that much we need to do to capture and culture fisheries potential. A robust management and regulatory framework was needed already, and we needed to promote inland fisheries that is lagging behind, and aquaculture through aquaculture means producing some organism in aqueous environment or water. So that is fishery, also aquaculture, through a standardized operating procedures. Standard operating procedures are very much needed in fishery sector, because if you overexploit, the environment will be degraded. In fact, in the region of India and Sri Lanka, we have degraded the sea. We have degraded the sea climate very much because we went for very bad, very exploitative fishery there. And Sri Lankan government was very angry. They said that you exploited the environment of the seas, and now the new fishery sector in that region cannot be very much good. So you exploited everything. Value chain needs to be modernized and strengthened. Market rate export of globally competitive fish benchmarked with global standard. For example, from foreign countries we are getting the tuna fishes that have global advantage. So we can go for our Bombay duck that might be sold in global market at a very good price. Access to institutional credit and ensure food and national nutritional security also. And yeah, national security also, because the coastal areas are having many problems of invasion and you can say that infiltration. So that is also a problem that will be connected in security section. No, not a worry. Next topic is labor law reforms. Why labor law reforms? Already discussed many times. For bringing ease of doing business in India and somehow discouraging strikes and lockouts, we need some labor law reforms. Also, this is the view from company. But for labor also, the safety and security of the labor, for giving them right wages, also we need this labor law reforms. That is why labor law reforms have come. What is happening that whenever central government is going for the labor law reforms, that means for ease of doing business, we are going for contract labor and everything, rationalizing the labor wages and everything. But we are not giving the very much high labor wages. So many of the associations are protesting. They are going for the strike and lockdown. But the labor comes under the state list also. That means labor comes in concurrent list also. Concurrent list. Union and a state list both can make the laws. So when the central government was getting defeated in this purpose, many of the states went for labor law reforms because the protest will be limited. For example, one state, Madhya Pradesh, is taking one step. Then the laborers from the Andhra Pradesh, the Karnataka, they will not come for the protest. The protest will be limited. So that is what is happening. Madhya Pradesh has allowed units of business and industries to be operated without many of the requirements of the Factories Act. So they diluted the Factories Act. No, not many requirements. You can operate without these provisions of the act. Not a problem. This said the Madhya Pradesh government. So Uttar Pradesh government also did something. Uttar Pradesh government has come with an ordinance, ordinance from the governor, and that exempts the business and industries from labor laws. Okay, fine, you are exempted from the labor laws, do anything except for a handful, a few labor laws will be followed for a 3-year period. By this, ease of doing business. But suppose there will be protest, there will be protest, but at the state level. There are reports that several other states are also pursuing the similar measures because they want more production, they want competitive market, so they just want our industries to be made like China, and maybe some labor rights also will be decreased, or you can say that diminished. And some people will say that is exploitation also, but there can be some positive things also. So we will see that labor falls in concurrent list of the Indian Constitution, and so laws can be enacted by center and states both. So what are some main Indian labor legislations? You should remember that for, and in UPSC what can a question come? The question can come like, arrange this in chronology. Which labor act came before, which came after? First of all came this Factories Act of 1948. Before that had come the Industrial Disputes Act, and then Minimum Wages and Factories Act both came in 1948. So Factories Act came in 1948. What was the objective? This Factory Act only the Madhya Pradesh government is diluting in its territory. The main objective of this act is to ensure safety and measures on factory premises and promote the health and welfare workers. So suppose Factories Act 1948 says that these are the safety measures you need to take. Okay, these are the precautionary measures you need to take, the establishments. So that will lead to extra cost. More capital investment. Many conditions need to be fulfilled. But if we remove those conditions, the safety might be compromised, but the cost will be less. The company will survive more. So that is what the Madhya Pradesh government has done. They have diluted Factories Act 1948 in Madhya Pradesh. Second is Shops and Commercial Establishment Act 1961. This has regulations about how many hours work can be given to a worker. What will be the payment? Overtime conditions, weekly day off is needed or not, and if there is weekly day off, there is payment or not. Other holidays with pay. Annual leave, how many? Employment of children. If somebody dies during working in a factory, the employment will be given to children or not, and younger persons, and employment of women. All these conditions, and also this controls whether you can employ the children in the factories or not. You know, the 14-year and 18-year conditions for the in very hazardous industries, children, 18-year below people cannot work. But if you are working for your father in a shop, then till the age of 14 you are allowed. Before 14 you are not allowed to work with in assistance of your family also. So these are some conditions. All are listed in Shops and Commercial Establishment Act 1961. This Shop and Establishments Act also controls that whether the shop can be opened in the night or not. Okay, the minimum and the female employees can work or not in that shift. Then third is Minimum Wages Act 1948, very famous. It set the minimum wages, and there have been many protests about increasing this minimum wage from labor associations, and every government time to time has faced this protest that must be paid to a skilled and unskilled laborers both. Industrial Disputes Act, here only I want to tell you that MG Narega is unskilled labor thing. Industrial Disputes Act 1947, it relates to terms of service such as layoff. Suppose a company is laying off or giving pink slip to its workers. That dispute can be created how you through your workers. In last lecture only I told you about this 100 people minimum requirement condition. You can revise that. So Industrial Disputes Act 1947 deals with layoff, retrenchment, the same thing, and closure of industrial enterprise, and strikes and lockouts also. All these things are disputes, so they are dealt with Industrial Disputes Act 1947. So these are Indian labor legislations. There are some other ones also. For example, the Contract Labor Regulation and Abolition Act 1970. Okay. Payment of Wages Act 1936, other than Minimum Wages Act 1948. For the security, I told you about for social security we have three laws: Employees Provident Fund EPF Act 1952, Workmen's Compensation Act 1923, and Employee State Insurance Act, that is ESIC Act 1948. For the disputes and the industrial relations, I told you about Industrial Disputes Act 1947. In 1946, before independence, this law has come. Another law, Industrial Establishment Standing Order Act 1946. So what are the issues? What are the issues pertaining to evasion of labor laws? Why these governments are going for evasion of labor laws? Why they are avoiding them? First of all, ease of doing business and creating an enabling environment for exploitation. You can say that I don't think it is a very good statement saying that creating an enabling environment for exploitation. But anyway, the immediate suspension of labor laws by the states is far from being called a reform. The newspaper where I have taken this article that says that you are calling it a reform, but this is direct exploitation. But you have to avoid writing this in exam, okay? But you can say that this will lead to some compromise on the rights of the laborers. It will strip the labor of his basic rights. Compromise with, you don't say strip the labor, okay? You say compromise with the rights of the laborers, and there will be compromises about wages also, and the wages may not be rational, may be lower than the market. Counterproductive producer step also. These steps are far from pushing a greater formalization of the workforce. If you can lay off your workers anytime, if you are not looking out for their safety, that is not formalization, that is workforce informalization. That is, economic survey is saying that we need to go for the formalization of the workforce, while here these states UP and MP are going for the informalization. This move will in one go turn the existing formal workers into informal workers. Yes, because many of them will not get the social security schemes. Also, there will be no way for any worker to even seek grievance redressal, because we are ignoring in UP, we are ignoring all the acts related to labor. So the Industrial Dispute Act is also being diluted for next few months, three years actually. So there will be no grievance redressal system, and this sounds like forced labor. But you know, Article 23 of the Indian Constitution prohibits forced labor or begar, that you cannot impose someone to work without payment, and forced labor. Now you can make a point, no, this is not forced labor, they are going for the employment. But we know that Supreme Court in a case, this case PU Dayar versus Union of India 1902, held that force would mean any condition arising from the compulsion of economic circumstances. The labor knows that sitting at home he will not earn any money, he will earn zero, and he will die of hunger. So he goes to the industry. But industry he is getting suppose 10 rupees for the work. That is over exploitation. So that can also be called as force only. Okay, these circumstances make him to go there, but that is compromise on his rights and minimum wages. So when no choices is left, no alternative is left, and you are getting exploited in the industry, that will be called as forced labor only. That is against your Article 23 of the Indian Constitution. International commitments we have made with the ILO, International Labour Organization, that can be compromised. That is against this. These amendments in labor laws are in the spirit of International Labour Organization's Employment and Decent Work for Peace and Resilience Recommendation 2017. These amendments in labor laws, actually here the word is missing, against the spirit of International Labour Organization. Okay, International Labour Organization has this Employment and Decent Work for Peace and Resilience Recommendation 2017, but these so-called labor reforms, you can say labor right taking off, those are against this ILO recommendation 2017. What are some other issues related to Indian labor laws? First of all, there is complex set of law. I told you already so many laws, but you know, those are not the list complete. There are over 200 state laws and close to 50 central laws, all dealing with labor. And yet, there is no set definition of labor laws in the country. Very surprising. Applicability of labor laws is also having a problem, because these labor laws are not applicable on all the organizations. A large number of our workers are engaged in an unorganized sector, and it is more than 50%. Okay, probably 2/3 of the laborers are employed in unorganized sector, and they are not covered by labor regulations and social security. Applicability has a very narrow base. At present, nearly 83% are employed in informal economy. I was saying 75%, this is 83%. And these laws are inflexible. With the time, they have not changed. And recently in the last lecture, I talked to you that those companies which are employing more than 100 workers, they need government's approval before retrenchment of an employee or laying off an employee. So what does that mean? Many of the companies will not employ more than 100 workers permanently. They will just go for the contract employment so that they can lay off any employee anytime, any worker anytime. It has been argued that firms, those employing more than 100 workers, deter from hiring new workers because firing them requires government approval. So they will not go for permanent recruitment, they will go for contract, and contract means some kind of informal employment. Recently the term has come, platform worker. What are the steps we can take to face this problem? Short-term step, what is that? With respect to COVID-19 pandemic, both central and state government in India should follow the most governments have done across the world. And what have the most governments done across the world? Governments are partnering with the industry and allocating a percentage of GDP towards sharing the wage burden and ensuring health of laborers. Okay, so governments should go for some kind of subsidy thing. They should participate with the industries and say that let's together pay the wages to the laborers so that they are not having any harsh impact of this COVID-19 pandemic, and they can survive through this difficult phase. Okay, and also we need to take care of their health also, because many of the workers are also having the COVID-19. Long term steps, this is short term for the COVID-19 pandemic phase, but for the long term we need to some extra structural steps we need to take. Government has proposed recently 4 labor codes. By amalgamating all the labor laws, government is coming with 4 labor codes. So many laws that government, even when went for the amalgamation, there were 4 codes proposed, not only one. One code will be on wages, one code will be on industrial relation, one code will be on occupational safety, health and working condition, and the last one will be on the social security and welfare of the workforce. And these codes are pending, so these need to be passed very fast by parliament, so that their complexity can be reduced and things can be consolidated and streamlined. So this is the all discussion about labor laws. Our next topic is very important, very conceptual: TRIPS flexibilities. You will be hearing about the TRIPS of WTO, but generally we do not discuss about the TRIPS flexibility. So what is that? First of all, come to the news. What has happened that India asked, not WTO. WTO's initiative is TRIPS, but India went to G20 member countries. G20, India is also a member, okay? So India has asked, OECD, India is not a member. So India asked G20 members that please work on an agreement that would enable countries to use the flexibilities under TRIPS, okay? India asked G20 countries that please make a framework, make an agreement and propose this in WTO, and the flexibilities provided under the TRIPS in WTO can be increased. Why India is asking for more flexibilities, enabling of more flexibilities to the G20 or WTO? India is asking because India thinks that currently we are facing a situation where we need the medicines and vaccines at very cheap prices. These multinational companies are producing medicines and vaccines at very high prices. They have their patents, so no other company can make those medicines without giving a huge amount of royalty. If the huge amount of royalty is given, the medicines will become not affordable to the general public, and in particular the countries like countries in Africa and Asia. The people are not rich, so they will be compromising with their health and vaccine and medicines. So that is a very good thing, and India has called that please make an agreement and enable the use of TRIPS, that is trade related intellectual property rights. Intellectual property rights also include your patent, geographical indication, industrial design and everything. So here we are concerned about the patents, because patents involve innovation, right? So TRIPS flexibilities to ensure access to essential medicines. See, essential medicines, not all medicines, essential medicines, treatments also, and the vaccines also at affordable prices to the public. The reason India is giving is that if such an agreement is made, it will be possible for nations to issue compulsory licenses. What is compulsory license? In India, it is a concept that when a multinational company is coming with a patent producing the medicine, after the expiry of 20 years or something, Indian companies can produce the same medicine. Those are called generic medicine, because these are produced locally. So generic medicines, those are exactly the copies of the real medicine, but at very affordable price, very low price. So why we are not going for the initial stage? Why India is not able to produce the real medicine? Because we in our country research and development is very low. But once we learn that what was the composition of this real medicine, innovative medicine, we are very easily we are copying that. That is called compulsory licensing, and this is approved by the Supreme Court of India. Any company which filed a case against this, the foreign multinational companies filed many cases against this, that Indian medicine industry is selling our products at very cheap prices and we are not earning the real royalty. A sum of royalty is given, okay, to the original medicine producer, but that is not very profit making royalty. Any company which went to the Supreme Court of India, Supreme Court said that now not for the poor of the country and people needing the medicine, this is a matter of health and life. So the compulsory licensing will continue. For more flexibility in compulsory licensing, India is asking G20 members, please make an agreement and propose this in WTO, so that more flexibility will be provided, and that's how we will be producing generic copies of essential patented medicines that can be made available to the people at prices much lower than the original patented version of the medicine. That is the topic. That is why the TRIPS flexibilities. Now we need to understand what is TRIPS, what is your TRIPS flexibilities, both of these things. If you are willing to join WTO, World Trade Organization, there is a compulsory obligation that you must comply with TRIPS agreement also. Why? WTO protects the trading rights, cross-boundary, cross-border trade. WTO discourages subsidy, irrational subsidy, and market distorting forces. So one of that agreement is TRIPS agreement. Only if you comply with TRIPS agreement, you can join the WTO. There are other conditions also, but TRIPS agreement is one condition also. You need to sign that, you need to comply with that, because TRIPS agreement protects your intellectual property rights. Any innovative company, any innovative person producing a patent should get the fair price for this, okay? Otherwise the market will be distorted. Otherwise innovation will be discouraged. What if you are not getting the real price for your innovation? Research and development will not happen because the profit is not coming. So that is why TRIPS agreement under WTO. TRIPS agreement became effective in 1995. Okay, it is called to be the one of the most comprehensive multilateral agreements on intellectual property in the world. There is one organization related to intellectual property protection that was created very long back. Can you tell me the organization name? Its name starts with W, okay, ends with O. It is a 4-letter word. So this is the abbreviation form. Can you tell me some brief discussion about that organization if you know that? It will help in revising, and other people who are reading the comments also will be able to revise that and will thank you. It sets out the minimum standards for protection to be provided to each member, so that at least some protection you provide for any company or any person who is doing some intellectual initiative in intellectual research or a patent. Okay, it has provisions. Provisions are related to your civil and administrative procedures. Suppose a country can take some civil and administrative procedures which are against the TRIPS, so that will be a problem. So related to that, we are having the procedures of civil and administrative. We need a procedure for civil and administrative procedure and remedies also. Suppose a company's rights are violated, so some people went for Supreme Court, right? Some people went to Supreme Court, so that is a remedy. Supreme Court and High Court tribunals are also there. Provisional measures, special requirements related to border measures and criminal procedures also. In case the laws are violated, then criminal procedures also can start. We discussed TRIPS. Now India is asking for more TRIPS flexibilities. So there must be some already TRIPS flexibility existing. What are that? These are your spaces. These are your enabling a space that, okay, fine, in some conditions you can take some measures which will be welfare for the people, and we will be giving you some policy space for enabling that welfare initiative, even if goes against the spirit of the TRIPS, but limited one. They are policy spaces for countries to mitigate or reduce the impact of patents. Okay, so major flexibilities are provided. These are, first of all, parallel importation. Importation is related to trade, import. Okay, this parallel importation you will understand only if I tell you the one example. Suppose tomorrow, take an example, company Nexavar. Suppose Nexavar headquarter, take an example, imaginary example. No, Nexavar, don't take it. Take an example, ABC company situated in USA. ABC company made a patent, made a product, made a medicine. Now the medicine goes through compulsory licensing in India, and some Indian pharma companies have started producing the generic version of ABC's medicine. Okay, now suppose Africa, any country wants to import that medicine. Either it can import from the ABC company originally from the USA, but that medicine will be very costly. So African countries generally go for the Indian medicine, the generic version. In that situation, WTO has given the TRIPS flexibility, parallel importation, that you can either import from USA at a very high price, or you can also import from India, and for that original patent holders consent, that means ABC company's consent, will not be needed. Okay, will not be needed, because this patented product is marketed in another country, that is India. That is parallel importation, it is allowed. So related to that, compulsory licensing only. Compulsory licensing enables a competent government, for example Indian authority government, to issue license and use of a patented invention to a third party or government agency, Indian pharma companies or maybe government's companies, without the consent of the patent holder. Okay, that is compulsory licensing. Who will be providing the compulsory licensing? Indian government, Indian authorities will be providing. And who will be producing the generic medicine? Either the government agency, government pharma company, or any private company. And that will be happening without the consent of the original patent holder, because now original patent is no more there. Now we are having the compulsory licensing. This is allowed in India, and this is under the this TRIPS flexibilities. That is why legally allowed also. That is why they are losing the case also in the Supreme Court. But there are issues. Okay, they always raise the voice, and Trump is also speaking against this, because they see this as a huge loss to these companies' exchequer, and that affects the USA trade relations also with India in various platforms. Second exemption is very good, very much rationalized. Exemption from patentability. What is that? Suppose that ABC company was producing a medicine. So this was for fever. Take an example. But yesterday, Indian pharmaceutical companies realized that that medicine can also be used for cough. That medicine can also be used for diarrhea. So will a new patent will be required? No. There will be exemption, because there is no novelty. The original drug was already made. Now we are coming to a conclusion that there is some other benefit also. So for that, next patent will not be required. The agreement does not require the patenting of new uses of the known products already, including pharmaceuticals, and permits countries, for example Indian countries, to deny protection of such lack of novelty. No, there is no novelty involved. You already came up with the medicine. No novelty involved. If you are just changing the chemical also, it will not be new patent, because the purpose is the same. Inventive step or industrial applicability. On this basis, new patent will not be provided, and this was a case in Supreme Court. Next of our case, limits on data protection also. This is that as a condition for permitting the sale or marketing of a pharmaceutical product. Again, I will give you an example. That ABC company came in India, wanted to market its pharmaceutical product in Indian market. Then our government's drug regulatory authorities. Can you tell me in the comment section, Indian Drug Regulatory Authority, and under which ministry it is situated? And is there any act involved making this institution? So drug regulatory authorities will require that you are coming in Indian market, but first of all, please give your data. This happened in Ramdev's case also. Okay, Coronil government said that please give us the data. What safety, quality, and efficacy of the product you had in Coronil, please provide to us. Only then you can advertise your product as some COVID-19 eliminator. Okay, so data is required. Safety, quality, and efficacy will be checked. So that will delay the process. That will delay the process of marketing of the product made by the ABC company. So that delay is allowed. That is limits on data protection. TRIPS flexibilities. It is extension of transition period for least developed countries. The amendment to this happened in Doha Declaration. Okay, this extended the transition period for LDCs for implementation of the TRIPS obligation to 2021. This also can be said to become under TRIPS flexibilities, because the least developed countries do not have a very good infrastructure and governance system, and they are poor also. So they will be looking and caring for their food and poverty and the medicine, or otherwise they will be looking for the TRIPS implementation. Obviously the first three, TRIPS implementation, so many infrastructure, so many regulatory laws and all, these countries do not want to get involved themselves in these TRIPS obligations. So WTO said that okay, fine, your condition is very bad, you first struggle with your limited resources and all, improve, then in 2021 you can implement TRIPS and obligations, not a problem. So there is some exemption. So these countries can become the member of WTO till the time 2021. After that, they will have to oblige by TRIPS. Next topic is also very short and easy one. A status paper has come on government debt. This is coming by central government. This document, a status paper on government debt, and this is coming since 2010-11 UPA government era. What does this document contain? Obviously, this document will first of all cover the financing operations or fiscal deficit of the central government, and it is coming in 2020. So this will have the 2020 May. So this will have the data of 2018-19. What was the fiscal deficit of the government? What were the financing operations of the government? How much debt government is having? Every detail is present in a status report on government debt, coming since 2010-11 fiscal year. Also, this document will have the debt management strategy of the central government for the financial year 2019 to 2022. 3 years fiscal years debt management strategy government has made, and that debt management strategy is present in this status paper on government debt. So if you count the years, this is 9th edition of the status report on government debt. What are some data you should remember? That you can use it in mains answer also, and for prelims also it will help you in elimination. First data is normal data reading, okay, explanation will be less. Central government's debt as a percentage of the gross domestic product dropped. Debt has dropped but very marginally by 0.1%. Previously in the fiscal year 17-18 debt was for the central government only, okay, 45.8%. now it is 18-19 it is 45.7% of what, of GDP, or you can say that overall amount is 86.73 lakh crore. The general government debt, that means combined debt of center and states, okay, this is called general government debt. Previous one was central government, this is general government. General government includes states and center both. That has also declined by 0.1%. Previously it was overall 68.7%. now it is 68.6%. 0.1% decline in both. Central government's debt is 45.7% and general government debt is 68.6%. In the amount you can say that rupees 1.3 lakh crore, okay. As external debt stood at 2.7% of GDP or rupees 5.12 lakh crore in financial year 19. External debt, okay, there is internal debt and external debt both. So external debt is 2.7% of GDP. Also around 94% of the central's liabilities consisted of domestic debt, okay. You can see that external debt is only 22.7%. so most of the debt, 94.1%, is in domestic sector, domestic debt, of which 84.4% or rupees 59.968 lakh crore was made up of marketable securities. Very good thing, those securities which can be marketed. The tenure of the longest security was 37 years. 37 years debt instrument was the longest tenure of that securities which were marketable and which made 84.4% of the government's debt, internal debt. Average internal cost, average interest cost, what was that? For the center remained unchanged, okay. And 7.1% is the average interest rate government has to pay over its debt. So nominal GDP growth net of the average interest cost was 3.9% in financial year 19, okay. For the GDP it was 3.9%. However, this was within the limits of the sustainable debt parameters we have made. It was under the limit, so very good thing. So with this we end this lecture here. Tomorrow we meet again and we will start March month 2020 international relation. Very interesting topics coming up. Stay tuned, watch it tomorrow. Take care, bye bye.